They told you Russia was untouchable, that its oil empire was too vast, too vital, too protected to ever fall. But what if I told you that, in a matter of hours, Ukraine shattered that illusion, and with it, the very foundation of Moscow's power? This isn't just a story about bombs and drones. It's about strategy, deception, and a war that's no longer fought only on the battlefield, but in the fuel lines that power nations. While the world watched headlines, something much bigger was unfolding behind the scenes, something that most people will never fully understand. But you will, because in this video, you'll uncover the real reason why Russia's oil infrastructure was hit, and why this could be the beginning of an irreversible collapse. This isn't speculation. It's happening right now. And by the time you finish watching, you'll realize you've just seen a side of history that most people never will. Picture this: 337 drones, a relentless wave slicing through the night sky, zeroing in on Russia's largest energy infrastructure. In a single coordinated strike, Ukraine unleashed the biggest drone assault in history, hitting oil depots and military targets deep inside Russian territory. This wasn't just warfare, it was a strategic masterstroke designed to overwhelm Russia's air defense, disrupt its fuel supply, and send a chilling message to Moscow. A nation that once dictated the tempo of war suddenly found itself reeling, scrambling to contain the damage. And here's the real kicker: this isn't just about a single attack. It's a turning point, a shift in modern warfare that reshapes global power dynamics. What happens when a superpower starts bleeding from 1,000 cuts? If you want to truly understand the impact of these strikes and how they could alter the course of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button, because Ukraine's next move, targeting the Druzhba Pipeline, sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. When Ukraine struck the Druzhba Pipeline, it wasn't just about damaging infrastructure. It was about cutting into the financial lifeline that fuels Russia's war machine. Supplying nearly 50% of Moscow's fuel, this pipeline is a backbone of Russian oil exports, moving millions of barrels across Europe. By targeting it, Ukraine forced Russia into a crisis, scrambling to contain the fallout and reroute supplies. The economic impact was immediate, but the strategic implications run even deeper. This wasn't just a blow to Russia's economy. It was a message to every nation still dependent on Russian energy. What happens when the world's reliance on Moscow begins to crack? And more importantly, how does Russia respond when one of its most valuable assets becomes a battlefield? The pressure was mounting, but Ukraine wasn't done yet, because the next step was even bolder: dismantling Russia's air defense in Crimea. For years, Crimea was Russia's fortress, a heavily defended stronghold bristling with missile systems, radar stations, and layered security. But Ukraine had a different plan. Instead of one massive strike, they chipped away at Russia's air defense, targeting radar installations, missile batteries, and command centers one by one. Each attack created small cracks in what once seemed impenetrable, turning Crimea from a shield into a liability. Without air superiority, Russia's ability to protect its Black Sea fleet and key military assets weakened drastically. And when a defense system starts to fail, every attack that follows becomes exponentially more devastating. The strategy was clear: wear them down, expose vulnerabilities, and strike where it hurts the most. With Crimea's air defenses in disarray, the next target was inevitable: the heart of Russia's naval power in the region. For decades, the Black Sea Fleet was a symbol of Russian naval dominance, projecting power across the region and securing vital trade routes. But Ukraine turned that strength into a weakness, launching a relentless campaign of missile and drone strikes that left a third of the fleet either sunk, damaged, or out of commission. Warships that once patrolled the sea with confidence were now forced into defensive positions, scrambling for cover in ports that were no longer safe. The loss wasn't just strategic, it was psychological. A navy that once dictated the terms of engagement was now struggling to protect itself, and every strike sent a clear message: nowhere was safe. But Ukraine wasn't stopping there. With Russia's naval forces in crisis, attention shifted to something even more critical: one of the most strategically important bridges in the world. Few structures hold as much symbolic and strategic weight as the Kerch Strait Bridge, Russia's critical link to Crimea. Built at enormous cost, it represents more than just a transportation route. It is a declaration of control, a physical embodiment of Moscow's grip on the region. That's why Ukraine's signals about targeting it sent shockwaves through the Kremlin. Even the mere threat forced Russia to divert its already strained air defense systems, stretching them even thinner across multiple fronts. Defending an exposed structure like this requires constant surveillance, missile systems, and an enormous drain on resources that Russia could no longer afford to spare. The bridge stood, for now, but Ukraine's strategy was clear. Keep Russia guessing, keep it reacting, and strike where it hurts the most. And that's exactly what happened next, as Ukrainian drones expanded their reach, hitting multiple regions deep inside Russian territory. War isn't just fought on front lines. It's fought in supply chains, infrastructure, and strategic nerve centers. That's why Ukraine's drone strikes didn't stop at Crimea or the Druzhba Pipeline. Instead, they reached deep into Russia itself, striking oil refineries, military bases, and key logistical hubs across Kursk, Oryol, Lipetsk, Ryazan, and Bryansk. This wasn't about random attacks. It was a calculated campaign to weaken Russia's ability to sustain its war effort. Every refinery hit meant less fuel for tanks and aircraft. Every military site damaged meant disrupted supply lines. And every strike forced Russia to rethink its defenses, spreading its forces thinner and thinner. The deeper Ukraine's drones penetrated, the clearer the message became. Nowhere was truly safe. And the consequences of these attacks weren't just military. They sent economic shockwaves across Europe, especially for one key Russian ally. Hungary had long been one of Russia's closest partners in Europe, securing favorable deals for energy imports while much of the EU moved towards sanctions. But when the Druzhba pipeline was hit, that special relationship meant nothing. Suddenly, Hungary's primary source of oil was cut off, plunging the country into an energy crisis overnight. Gas stations feared shortages, businesses faced price hikes, and the government found itself caught between loyalty to Moscow and the growing instability of relying on Russian fuel. This wasn't just an attack on infrastructure. It was an attack on Russia's ability to use energy as a geopolitical weapon. And with every barrel of oil lost, the economic impact on Moscow became harder to ignore. The numbers were staggering, and the financial losses were mounting fast. The Druzhba pipeline moves 1.4 million barrels of oil per day, a lifeline worth billions to the Russian economy. With the shutdown, Moscow was bleeding over $662 million per week, a number that sent panic through economic circles and forced desperate talks about alternatives. But here's the real problem. There weren't many. The European market, once a guaranteed buyer of Russian oil, was slipping further out of reach. With sanctions already limiting options and geopolitical pressure mounting, Russia found itself in a tightening financial chokehold. This wasn't just about losing money, it was about losing influence. Energy had always been Russia's strongest leverage, and now, piece by piece, that advantage was being stripped away. But Ukraine wasn't just thinking economically, they were thinking strategically, and their next move was a masterclass in military deception. Not every attack is meant to destroy. Some are meant to deceive. That's exactly what happened when Ukraine launched a drone strike on the Ryazan military airfield. Not as a primary target, but as a diversion. The real objective lay elsewhere, but Russia took the bait, scrambling its air defense to counter the threat. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. This wasn't just about one mission. It was about exposing flaws in Russian military strategy, forcing them to react instead of dictate the terms of battle. In war, the side that controls the narrative controls the fight, and Ukraine was proving that they could manipulate Russia into playing their game. And the message sent wasn't just military. It was deeply political, a direct challenge to Putin himself. Every missile fired, every drone launched, every refinery struck, it all built up to one undeniable truth. Ukraine was no longer just surviving this war, they were shaping it. And for Vladimir Putin, that was a nightmare scenario. The strikes weren't just damaging infrastructure. They were eroding his image of control, both at home and abroad. Allies began to question Russia's military strength, while internal voices within Moscow grew louder about the cost of war. This wasn't just about immediate damage. It was about long-term pressure. The world was watching, and every attack forced Putin closer to a crossroads. Escalate, negotiate, or risk losing control entirely. And if history has taught us anything, It's that when leaders are backed into a corner, their next move can change everything. Now you know. What seemed like just another headline, Ukraine hits Russian oil, was actually a masterclass in modern warfare, economic disruption, and psychological pressure. You've just walked through layers of strategy that most people will never even hear about. But now that you've seen what's really behind the curtain, ask yourself, how many other world-shaping events are happening right now, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? Why does so little of this reach the mainstream? And more importantly, who benefits from that silence? Let me ask you something. Did this make you feel smarter? Like you just unlocked a piece of truth the average person never questions? That's because you did. And it's no coincidence. The most successful, informed, and influential people in the world stay ahead by understanding stories like this before everyone else. If you want to be part of that group, the ones who see the full board while others only watch the pieces, then you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep diving into this world of hidden power moves, global strategy, and historic turning points. Because this video, it's just the beginning.